Adam, several people have been asking me how to read and understand the Quran. Can you share your experience?
Sure, Omar. I'll tell you how I started and how I try to improve. Of course, some people might have other approaches, but this is what worked for me. Before you even begin reading or reflecting on the Quran, the most important step is this. You must believe in Allah and in the Quran. Believe it or not, this is the single most critical issue. You have to believe that the Quran is the word of Allah and that no one knows how to guide better than Him. He is the only true expert when it comes to creating a book of guidance. Keep in mind these important verses. Allah said in chapter 11, verse 1, "A book, its verses have been perfected, then detailed, from one who is wise and all-aware." And in chapter 54, verse 22, Allah said, "And we have certainly made the Quran easy for remembrance. So is there any who will remember?" And in chapter 7, verse 52, Allah said, "And we have certainly brought them a book which we detailed with knowledge as guidance and mercy for a people who believe." And in chapter 47, verse 24, Allah said, "Do they not then reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts?" From these verses, it's crystal clear. The Quran is perfect, detailed, easy to understand, and most importantly, we are commanded as Muslims to read and reflect on it. If you don't believe this conclusion, then honestly, don't bother trying to reflect on the Quran, because reflection starts with trust. You need to understand that the Quran is as detailed as Allah intended it to be, not as you or so-called scholars wish it to be. If something is not mentioned in the Quran, then you are not obligated at all to believe it, follow it, or practice it. Come Judgment Day, Allah will ask you about what's in the Quran, nothing else. Allah said in chapter 43, verse 44, "And indeed it is a reminder for you and your people, and you will be questioned."
Understood, Adam. If you start reflecting on the Quran with the mentality that you will not understand and that you do not trust Allah's words and wisdom, you won't get anywhere.
Exactly, Omar. Allah said in chapter 29, verse 69, "And those who strive for us, we will surely guide them to our ways. And indeed, Allah is with the doers of good." So if you don't have the right mindset and you're not even trying to read and understand the Quran, how do you expect Allah to guide you? The second key point is this. You need to clear your mind of everything you've been taught from sources outside the Quran. Not everything you've heard is necessarily wrong, but you must reassess everything in light of the Quran. If you were born Sunni, then you've likely absorbed many beliefs that aren't found in the Quran. The same applies if you were born Shia or into any other sect. Just because you were born into a particular group doesn't automatically mean that group is on the right path. Allah has warned us in many verses not to follow our forefathers blindly. Yet today, so-called scholars completely ignore these warnings, even though they're mentioned repeatedly in the Quran. Allah said in chapter 2, verse 170, "And when it is said to them, 'Follow what Allah has revealed,' they say, 'Rather we follow what we found our forefathers upon.'" Even though their forefathers understood nothing and were not guided, what amazes me is that when I bring up these verses in discussions, people just ignore them. They either claim I've misunderstood these very clear verses, or they say the verses were meant for other people. But if that were true, why would Allah keep telling us these stories and examples?
Yes, I've come across many people who twist the clear messages that Allah has given us in the Quran. They want you to ignore what you see with your own eyes and believe their interpretations instead.
That brings me to the third point, Omar. The vast majority of the Quran is clear and understandable to anyone who reads it. If you come across a verse that is straightforward and you understand it, don't let anyone intimidate you into thinking it means something else. For example, Allah said in chapter 2, verse 256, "There is no compulsion in religion." And in chapter 18, verse 29, "And say, 'The truth is from your Lord, so whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve.'" But to justify a hadith that says, "Kill whoever leaves Islam," they try to convince you that these verses only apply to entering Islam, not leaving it. They want you to deny what you clearly read with your own eyes. They want you to believe that Allah, who perfected the Quran, somehow forgot to include such a critical detail. They don't want you to believe your own eyes or trust your logic. But Islam is built on the freedom to believe. If someone remains in Islam only out of fear of being killed, then that person isn't a believer at all. They're a hypocrite. So trust what you read, trust in Allah, and don't let anyone bully you into twisting the words of Allah. And always remember this verse from chapter 3, verse 78. Indeed, among them is a group who distort the scripture with their tongues, so that you may think it is from the scripture, but it is not from the scripture. And they say, this is from Allah, but it is not from Allah. And they speak lies about Allah while they know. So is killing those who leave Islam part of the scripture? It's not from the scripture. Those who distort the truth in the Quran will face grave consequences. Allah said in chapter 10, verses 69 and 70, those who lie about Allah will never succeed. They may enjoy the pleasures of this world for a short time, but in the end, they will face a severe punishment. Their final return is to Allah, and He will hold them accountable for their lies and disbelief.
I agree, Adam. These are basic tools and knowledge you need to have before you even start reading and reflecting on the Quran. So how is the Quran divided?
The Quran is roughly divided into legislation, 30%, stories, 40%, Tawheed, oneness of Allah, 15%, the hereafter, 10%, warnings and moral lessons, 5%. This is approximate based on themes found across chapters. I also divide the Quran in another way. Verses that are clear and straightforward and should be understood without external research, but always in light of their context within the surrounding verses. Verses or words that require further exploration, where the Quran itself provides clarification through similar wording, themes, or repeated concepts across different chapters. Verses whose full meanings are beyond immediate understanding, often related to scientific, linguistic, or future realities. These are not essential for daily guidance and are best left to experts to study over time. Verses meant to inspire imagination and reflection, ta'ammul, not tied to law or personal obligation, but designed to awaken your heart and deepen your connection with Allah. Ambiguous or allegorical verses, mushabihat, only Allah knows their full interpretation. Focus instead on the clear verses, muhkamat, which form the foundation of guidance.
Let's go over some examples, Adam.
Sure. A great example of a clear and easy to understand verse is from chapter 33, verse 35. Indeed, the Muslim men and the Muslim women, the believing men and the believing women, the obedient men and the obedient women, the truthful men and the truthful women, the patient men and the patient women, the humble men and the humble women, the charitable men and the charitable women, the fasting men and the fasting women, the men who guard their private parts and the women who do so, and the men who remember Allah often and the women who do so, Allah has prepared for them forgiveness and a great reward. Anyone who reads this verse can clearly understand its message. Another straightforward example is from chapter 12, verse 40. Do not worship except Allah. Clear, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. And I should add, verses like these make up the vast majority of the Quran.
How about topics or words that require further exploration?
A prime example of topics that need deeper research is the words Zakat and Sadaqa. I've included in the description of this video links to 2 separate episodes I created that explain Zakat and Sadaqa from the Quran only, and how the conclusion I reached is completely different from the one taught through Hadith. Major topics like Zakat, Sadaqa, prayer, riba are mentioned in different verses in different chapters. You need to reflect on all the verses that mention a specific topic in order to fully understand it. When it comes to specific word meanings, especially if you're reading in Arabic, the best method is to search for how that word is used elsewhere in the Quran. The Quran explains itself. An example is the word sabr, sabr. While it's often translated simply as patience, the Quran gives it much deeper meaning, including perseverance, endurance in worship, steadfastness in adversity, and restraint against sin. When you see how the word is used in multiple verses, the full scope of its meaning becomes clearer. So always try to find other verses where the same word appears. Allah designed the Quran to explain itself. You just have to put in the effort. Allah said in chapter 25, verse 33, and they do not come to you with an argument except that we bring you the truth and the best explanation. This means every topic in the Quran, no matter how complex, has its explanation within the Quran itself. Finally, if you're reading the Quran in English, Focus on the literal translation of the words, not the interpretive explanations.
Makes sense, Adam. What about verses whose full meanings are beyond immediate understanding?
Yes, these are verses that touch on scientific facts, linguistic precision, or future realities. They are not essential for daily guidance and are best left to experts to study and explore over time. For example, Allah said in chapter 51, verse 47, "And we built the heaven with might, and we are still expanding it." Modern science now confirms that the universe is expanding, a fact humanity only discovered recently, though it was mentioned in the Quran over 1,400 years ago. Another example is the description of the development of the embryo in the Quran. People could not have fully understood it centuries ago, yet today modern science confirms its accuracy.
What about verses that are meant to inspire imagination and deep reflection?
There are many verses where Allah calls on us to reflect on His creations and the world around us. Allah said in chapter 41, verse 53, "We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. But is it not sufficient concerning your Lord that He is, over all things, a witness?" And in chapter 88, verse 17, Allah asks, "Then do they not look at the camels, how they are created?" Chapter 55 is another great example. It's filled with verses designed to spark wonder, reflection, and imagination.
Yes, chapter Ar-Rahman contains many verses urging us to reflect. But what about the final category? Ambiguous or allegorical verses?
These are the ambiguous or allegorical verses whose full meanings are known only to Allah. This concept is explained directly in the Quran. These verses often relate to unseen matters, the nature of Allah's attributes, or events of the hereafter. They are not meant to form the foundation of laws or belief systems. Instead, Allah instructs us to base our understanding on the clear verses, muhkamat, which are the true source of guidance. Allah said in chapter 3, verse 7, "It is He who has sent down to you the book." In it are verses that are precise, muhkamat. They are the foundation of the book, and others that are ambiguous, mutashabihat. As for those in whose hearts is deviation, they follow what is ambiguous, seeking discord and seeking its interpretation. But no one knows its interpretation except Allah. Now, some people read this verse differently. They believe it means that scholars, along with Allah, may know the interpretation of the ambiguous verses. But the stronger and more natural reading, and the one most consistent with the Quran's message, is that only Allah knows their full meaning. This interpretation helps keep us humble and reminds us not to build doctrines or rulings on verses that were never meant to be fully understood by us. Examples include, Allah said in chapter 11, verse 7, "And His throne was upon the water." Allah said in chapter 17, verse 85, "And they ask you about the soul. Say, the soul is of the affair of my Lord, and you have not been given of knowledge except a little." Allah said in chapter 33, verse 63, "People ask you concerning the hour. Say, its knowledge is only with Allah. And what may make you perceive? Perhaps the hour is near." Verses like these are meant to remind us of our limits, not to create arguments. Focus on what is clear. That's what Allah holds us accountable for.
Thanks for the explanation, Adam. Any final advice?
Yes, Omar. I actually have 4 final pieces of advice. First, don't burden yourself with minor details that Allah did not mention in the Quran. When something is truly important, Allah provides the necessary detail. Second, if you come across something you don't fully understand, that's not a reason to run to Hadith for answers. The Quran is complete and sufficient. Lack of understanding is not proof that other sources are needed. Third, it's okay to listen to explanations from others, especially on topics you find difficult. But choose carefully. Listen to those who say, "Allah said in the Quran," not those who start with, "Someone heard the Prophet say." Stick to what is from Allah. Finally, let me end with this verse from chapter 39. Allah has sent down the best hadith, statement, a book uniform in its parts, repeating, "The skins of those who fear their Lord shiver from it. Then their skins and their hearts soften to the remembrance of Allah." That is the guidance of Allah. He guides with it whom He wills. And whoever Allah misguides, for him there is no guide. Return to the book, read it, reflect on it, and trust that Allah meant it to guide you, not confuse you.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed discovering the real Islam and found the information helpful.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you can continue learning more about Islam directly from the Quran.